This is Valerie Rosas with XT2000 Orange Oil Plus in San Diego, California, and you are listening to the world's #1 pest control training podcast, the Pest Geek Podcast with Frank Hernandez.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your pest geek, here discussing all things pest. We want to remind our audience to join in on the revolution. That's right, join in on the conversation, be part of the society. Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we're on YouTube, we're on the web, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out there the notes, everything that we put into the podcast. They're all on there. And here is Stephen Van Tassel with today's topic.
Hi, my name is Stephen Van Tassel. I'm with Wildlife Control Consultant. Wanted to thank Frank of Pest Geek Podcast for inviting me on to give some presentations and talks on various issues relating to wildlife control, or as some people like to call it, vertebrate pest control. So this is my inaugural presentation, so let's talk about something I think every wildlife control operator and pest control professionals should know about, and that is carcass disposal. Yes, you heard it right, carcass disposal. That is, not everything you're going to be trapping can be released and relocated or translocated to a new location. Sometimes you have to put the animal down. Now the question is, what do you do with that carcass so that you, 1, protect the environment, 2, protect other people from potential diseases and injuries that may occur with that animal, and that you don't contaminate water supplies, and you don't cause public offense, because the fact of the matter is, dead animals cause people to be upset. Why? Because simply it reminds them of their own mortality, and they don't want to be reminded that they too are going to die. Wildlife control is a sort of like undertaking. It's something that evokes deep emotions in people, and they don't want to be reminded that they too will die, and they don't like the idea that this animal may have suffered during its death. So you want to be sure that you're sensitive to those customer feelings and feelings of the public who may get very upset when they see dead animals around. So you have to be sure you're taking care of these dead animals carefully and responsibly and discreetly. Those are the principles that you want to follow. So what are the options for taking care of the animal carcasses? Well, this is going to be kind of a summary survey of things. You can, if you're interested in a more deeper conversation about this, do download the publication that I co-authored on carcass disposal, and we'll have the link up on the Pest Geek Podcast website, so you can download it there if you want additional information. But I want to give you a little brief survey of some options that are commonly available. There are others. This won't be the most comprehensive. We're going to give you the major ones available, maybe some that you haven't thought about, because the fact of the matter is, time is money. Carcasses cost money because you have to deal with them now. So this is going to be something you want to think about, and having options is always good, because not every pest controller or wildlife control professional is in downtown New York City. Sometimes they're out here in the big state of Montana, which is where I live. So let's get started. First one I want to talk about is surface carcass disposal. Yeah, you've heard that right. It's simply taking the animal that you've killed and dropping it on the surface of the ground where nature can take its course. The fact of the matter is that surface carcass disposal is actually the most environmentally responsible way of handling a carcass. Why? Because it allows those nutrients to be recycled into the environment the fastest. However, it also has a lot of downsides, not to mention aesthetics. You can't do this in where people are going to be walking their dogs or walking along and all of a sudden they see dead raccoons all over the place. So it has to be a remote area away from where you're having people foot traffic and people letting their dogs loose. So that is a big problem, downside of this particular method. There's also other downside of this method, and that is if you're in a place where it's remote and you have all these carcasses, or you're using this particular location to dump animal carcasses on the surface, you want to make sure you don't oversaturate the area. And when you're doing surface carcass disposal, you'll also attract large carnivores to that particular area. So cattle ranchers are going to see a heightened increase of coyotes and other predators, and they will probably not like that. So it's something you have to keep in the back of your mind, whether that location that you're using is suitable. You have to have landowner permission, of course, to do this. And then, of course, we have to be thinking about the environmental impact. You don't want to be putting carcasses on the surface of the ground where those carcasses can be rolling with water runoff and contaminating water supplies. So you have to be thinking about the density, the number of animals you're putting on the surface of the ground. Fact of the matter is, depending on your location, that carcass may be consumed quickly or it may be consumed slowly depending on your particular location. So there's a lot of variables to be thinking about here. But one thing is you never want to oversaturate a particular area. Why? Because then you're going to start having some contamination issues if there's surface water nearby, wells nearby. You want to be thinking about all of those types of variables. So it's not impossible, of course, but it just means you can't just simply say, oh, there's a vacant lot, let me dump a carcass over there. No, you have to be thinking about other options about where's that carcass ultimately going to go. That's the question that you have to answer for your zone. Where is that carcass going to go? Where are the remnants going to go? What's going to be attracted to that particular area? But I don't want to leave on a negative note here in surface carcass disposal. It is the most environmentally friendly. Also, there's no digging required. Just simply deposit it, but you have to have the right spot. Are there any other options? Yeah, let's go to the second one. This is just regular burial, burying an animal in the ground, just like normally. You just dig a grave and drop the animal inside of it. Tough to do in the wintertime, of course, because the ground's often frozen. So you may need to have some sort of mechanical way of doing it, but certainly during the summertime, you should be able to do it. You also need to have a location that allows you to do some deep burials. How deep? You generally want to have a hole deep enough so there's at least 24 inches of soil above the carcass. Is that a requirement everywhere? No. We're talking about averages and ideals. Some parts of the country don't have 24 inches of surface soil to bury a carcass. There you have to do what you can. But understand, or in accordance with the law of your particular state, you have to kind of consult the laws in your state about carcass disposals. And generally it'll be things about how close you can do things near water sources, wells, surface water, streams, runoff areas. And so you want to be sure it's deep enough, not just to prevent some contamination, but also needs to be deep enough so that scavengers can't dig it back up. The last thing you want is for someone's little Fifi, their golden retriever, dragging home a raccoon carcass to the house. That's the last thing you want. And then all of a sudden people are upset. They're doing an investigation. They want to find out, oh, we saw you're a truck nearby. They're interviewing you. What are you doing with your carcasses? It becomes a huge PR nightmare. You don't want that kind of publicity. And plus, then the people are going to say their dogs are getting sick and all kinds of things. So you want to be careful of that. If you can't dig something deep enough, sometimes you can put rocks or screening or some sort of obstruction over the top of the grave to make sure. Some people may even put a little lime down to try to control some of that odor. I haven't used the correct type of lime. I was using ground lime, just grass lime when I was doing some work, but I did that in a barrel when I was trying to just store some animals before I had them removed. So you want to be thinking about ways of controlling odor, but without causing further contamination of the surrounding soil. And of course, whenever you're using a chemical for something, you always got to be thinking about following the label, of course. Always when you're thinking about depositing carcasses somewhere, you always want to think of how was that animal killed. If you used a poison to kill that particular animal, you have to be thinking about what does the label say in terms of how that carcass is to be disposed of. So oftentimes with animals in wildlife control, there are no toxicants permitted for those animals, although there are some out here in the West. We can poison prairie dogs, for instance. We can poison ground squirrels. So a lot of those situations, you have to bury those animals in the ground. You can't be doing surface carcass disposal with those. However, in other parts, but for other animals, you want to be thinking about how was it killed? Is it ill? If you're dealing with an ill animal, you never want to have an ill animal placed on the surface of the ground, because then that's going to spread the disease somewhere else. So burial of carcasses is going to provide you an opportunity to get that diseased animal away from spreading the disease to other animals like scavengers. So that's one of the advantages of burial. But you got to make sure that scavengers can't dig it back up. That's going to be important. Finally, you want to be thinking about how many burials you can put within a particular acre. That partly depends on the soil conditions. How sloped is the soil? Is it going to contaminate other water supplies? Where are water supplies nearby? But as a rule of thumb, something to think about, you probably want to be careful of doing any more. You want to be thinking about 10 to 20 carcass disposals an acre. And then, probably give that 4 or 5 years before you come back to that location again. So it's variable depending on your situation. See how this gets complicated. So I'm getting a little geeky on you here, but I don't want you just sort of cavalierly thinking about this, because a lot of pest control operators and wildlife control operators really aren't thinking, I think, deeply enough about where they're putting their carcasses. Another option for carcass disposal, of course, is cremation. The beauty of cremation is it's burned up and gone. But the downside of it is the cost. When I was doing cremation, it cost me at the time, this was years ago, 50 cents a pound. So what I would do is I would take my carcasses, I would double bag them, or actually I would bag them, put them inside of a designated freezer. You don't want to be putting carcasses or wild animals in freezers where you're getting your food from. Okay, you want to have a designated freezer. Put those animals in the freezer, and then I would take a big shipment up to the crematorium. It would cost me 50 cents a pound. But the beauty of it was I didn't have to worry about odor. I didn't have to worry about a dog dragging the carcass home. I didn't have to worry about someone getting scratched from the carcasses or anything. It was just done, one and done. And so it really saved me on the liability side and, of course, on the public relations side. Done and done. You just simply talk to your veterinarian and ask them for where they take their carcasses to, and they may even have a crematorium on site. Crematoriums are being regulated by the EPA, so don't think this is just going to be a little furnace thing you're going to do in your backyard. No, you want to be thinking about the EPA requirements. That's why you probably need to go to a designated site where they can do crematoriums, where they cremate dogs and cats, and they'll probably cremate your wildlife for you as well. But there is an additional cost for that you're going to have to be thinking about. Another option is a lot of wildlife control operators use, believe it or not, trash cans and dumpsters. So the beauty of this, of course, is the convenience factor. It's simply right there. But there's a lot of potential downsides here. So let's talk. First of all, you want to be sure you're talking with your trash person and ask them, is this legal? Is this appropriate for me to be doing this? You don't want to be doing this on the down low and sort of sneaking something out there. That is a bad idea. You want to be sure that you're doing things on the up and up, because you want to prevent something bad from happening. So if it is legal for you to use the trash can or the dumpster, you want to use the following principles to reduce harming your trash person during this particular process, or people that trash pick your trash. That's something to be thinking about. So number one, you want to freeze your carcasses. You want to double bag your carcasses, freeze them. Now, if you don't want to double bag, you use an industrial strength bag. It's 3 millimeters. Get quality bags, freeze them up. Freezing prevents any liquid from exposing people, because there's a lot of things other than that are in those animals that can contaminate people. You don't want them having spilled with blood or saliva, because you don't know what's in that. So certainly you don't want all the maggots, and the freezing also reduces odor. The double bagging or the industrial strength bags is important because animals still have claws, they still have teeth, and those things can still scratch people if they're grabbing that bag inappropriately. So what I like to tell people to do is if you're using a trash can or you're using a dumpster, you have your frozen animals and you want to bring those animals out the day of the trash pickup or the night before. ideally the day of. So that way those animals are still going to be frozen by the time they're picked up. Never put the animals at the top of the can or the bottom of the can, because the handler of that trash can is going to have the most access to the top and the bottom. The top when he grabs it, the bottom when he dumps it. So you want to have the carcasses in the middle of your container, because that reduces the likelihood that he will come in contact with it. If you want to take it an extra step, put the carcasses that you've bagged inside of a cardboard box and then put that in the middle, because now you have an additional barrier to prevent any scratches or bites or any type of contamination or punctures that can occur when someone's handling that particular trash. With your dumpsters, of course, if you keep them locked and then you'd unlock them by the time the person comes to empty the dumpster, that's another option for you. I really like the idea of people taking the carcasses to the dump on their own. This minimizes the risk. You're going to be wearing your gloves. You're going to be wearing your protective equipment. You're going to be putting that. You're going to know what you're handling, so that you're reducing the risk of someone that you don't know or doesn't know what they're handling can get injured from. So because you know what you're handling and you're bringing it right straight to the dump. Talk to your dump person. It's probably going to be very inexpensive for you to do it that way again. Bring them frozen carcasses, bagged it according to the method that they require. The advantage of this throwing away process is you don't have to worry about whether you're contaminating an area with disease, because the trash is already going to be brought to a designated facility that can handle a whole host of things, including pollutants as well, from a variety of areas. So that is the advantage. So think about that as a potential option for yourself. Are there any other options for you? And the answer is yes. There's one more that I'd like to talk about, and that is repurposing. Repurposing means that you're taking the animal that you've killed and you're giving it away to like a wildlife rehabilitator to feed to the animals that they are rehabilitating. People that are handling hawks and other predatory animals need meat, and it's expensive for them to go to the store and buy it. And so some wildlife rehabilitators are comfortable using wild animals because they're hoping these animals are going to be released back in the wild anyways. And so they are designed to take wild meat. You know, that hawk is going to eat a squirrel. It's not a big deal. So why not give them the squirrel that you happen to have put down, or give them other meat that you've happened to put down? There are some restrictions, of course, as you can't be bringing your wildlife rehabilitator animals that are diseased or sick, or you think they're questionable. They need to be sort of freshly killed, and you can't have poisoned them, of course. So there should be no poisoning involved with that at all. So you need to consult with the wildlife rehabilitator and ask him or her whether they want it, and if they do, what the requirements are that would govern your giving them that animal. So is it a little bit of cost? Yes, it's cost in terms of the time, and you've got to fuss with it and that sort of thing. But there's a halo effect, because now that animal's not being in effect wasted. It's being used to contribute to the improvement of another animal that's being rehabilitated to ultimately be released back into the wild. So there's a halo effect with that. That's going to be part of your charitable work, which I hope every pest control or wildlife control operating company considers that a portion of their time should be done for voluntary and charitable type efforts. And this would be part of that. It would be a way of using that animal rather than just simply wasting it. Again, I hope this has been helpful for you, just to understand some options that you have available. I haven't covered every option, but I've covered the biggies, the ones that are the most common. And again, if you want additional information on this, download the publication on Carcass Disposal. That link will be there on the Pest Geek Podcast website. Thanks for listening. And then thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me. And I'd love your feedback from those of you who are listening to this. Let me know if you have issues that you'd like me to talk about. We're going to hopefully, if we get a good response, we're going to continue this part of the broadcast talking about wildlife control. Thanks for listening. Off to you, Frank.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.